The thing about being rebellious is that you really need to be motivated by something that's worth the rebellion. That's something that's actually worth the rebellion. That you really need to think it is worth your effort, worth your energy to think this restriction is a violation of my freedom, or it doesn't make any sense to me, or I can't breathe within this restriction. Hi everybody. Sorry. It's time for another archetype video. And so today I'm going to do the rebel because it just is one of those archetypes that is so prevalent and so everywhere. Years ago, I did an audio series on the sacred contract of America. And I took a look at what I thought were the 12 dominant archetypal patterns of the United States. And of course, the rebel is certainly one of them, because the whole country started from the American Revolution or the Rebellion. And the British called the colonists who were in the fight the rebels, earning them prestige as once they won the revolution. But it set a tone in the United States, archetypally, that there is something naturally rebellious in the American character, and maybe there is, but the rebel is an archetype that is associated with the United States. I think everybody has a bit of the rebel in them. Not everybody is a rebel as a major force in their nature, but everybody has a touch of the rebel in them. And if you look at how we develop as little people and go into our youth, and then as we mature through life, there is a passage, the rebellious passage that we go through. It, you call it the teenage years or whatever. But you know, there is a need in us to discover our own territory and to not necessarily accept the rules that are governing us from our society. And thank God that we have this. The Martin Luther King Jr. was a magnificent rebel, a civil rights rebel. And he fought against rules that needed, and restrictions that needed to come down. So there you have a portrait of a person who stood up against and organized a social rebellion that needed to happen. Gloria Steinem is a rebel, and she fought against the restrictions on women's rights. And we need a lot more rebels to rise up now and to take on the Roe v. Wade nonsense, so women can go back to having rights over their own body, whatever they want to do, whether they want to have a child or not. It's not the government's decision. So it'll bring out the rebellious spirit. It will bring out the rebel in people. But when we look at just going back to the passage of all of us growing up, every one of us can remember going through what's called the rebellious stage. Usually striking when alongside when puberty hits, and then boom, you go into a stage of not wanting to be told what to do, which is a characteristic of the rebel. I don't want to be told what to do. No one can tell me what to do. And that's fine, except that when you don't know what you're doing, not being told what to do can be a problem. But from a different point of view, from an archetypal point of view, baby human beings, young human beings, need to test their power of choice. They need to test what they can do. They need to test their wings, their wingspan when it comes to choice, when it comes to their power in their life, their power to make a choice and to create a consequence, and to assess the situation, the system they're living in, and whether or not that system is going to work for them. And from this rebellious nugget that is in every person comes the changes that move society forward. That where young people say this, that was your way, but it's not our way. And so people they stage their rebellions when you're a kid, you know, the way you're going to wear your hair, the way you're going to dress, the way you start rebelling against the small things in your household, and the kinds of restrictions that you start pushing the envelope. And you can count on it, because there's a nugget in every single person that wants to test boundaries, And this is really the positive side of the rebel archetype, that need to say that this was okay for you, but it's not okay for me. If we didn't have that, we would still be using candles instead of electricity, instead of this. There's people who are always saying, there's got to be more, there's got to be different. Why are we being held back by this? So an aspect to the rebel is not just not being told what to do, which is how many times people will say, I just can't stand being told what to do, which is very interesting, because so many of these people don't know what to do anyway. But they don't want to be told what to do, even though they're not sure what to do. But they don't want to be told, not by anybody else. But it's also this characteristic of, I just have to try something new. I just have to break free from the restrictions that are holding together, that control you. And so that's a characteristic of the rebel archetype, to push us to break out of restrictions that are meaningless, that are just controlling, and to expand beyond civil restrictions. You have the civil rights movement, you have the women's rights movements. All of these are rebellious movements of the 60s that needed to happen to break people out of thinking that this is the way it always has to be. So the rebel is it's a high functioning force. And I think about the movies, and I was thinking, like, what movies really illustrate kind of almost rebel heroes? And you have that in Robin Hood, for example. And you have it in like Good Morning Vietnam, where Robin Williams played Adrian Cronin, I think. But he drove his officers crazy with the way he ran the morning radio in Vietnam. And he staged his rebellion, by the way he played music. Cool Hand Luke is a movie that depicts a rebel restricted in a prison, and of course he becomes a hero among his fellow inmates for defying the restrictions of the guards. One of the most famous rebels who really did exist was Spartacus, who staged a massive rebellion of slaves during the time of the Roman Empire. And, of course, his story remains legend, and it's still talked about, and movies are still made about Spartacus, but he really did exist, and so he staged that rebellion. What triggers the rebel is freedom, the need to experience a type of freedom that doesn't exist in, that is not, they don't have a wide enough berth. I think Nelson Mandela was a rebel, and while he didn't march, he staged his rebellion from a prison by remaining true to his beliefs in the evil of apartheid. And so he became a figurehead for freedom in South Africa. Gandhi was a rebel, and he led people with passive resistance in India to gain India's independence from the British Empire. Rebels, the rebellious instinct, the rebel archetype is so essential and so powerful. So you can imagine that when the rebel is in its shadow, how dangerous it could be, how much trouble it could get someone in. So if you look at rebels, people who are rebellious for no other reason than to be stubborn, than because they're angry. Rebel without a cause. Remember that Jimmy Dean movie? Angry at his parents. I think that was one of the first movies that illustrated a teenager rebelling against the conventional childhood that was idealized in the 50s. The thing about rebellion is that, the thing about being rebellious is that you really need to be motivated by something that's worth the rebellion. That's something that's actually worth the rebellion. That you really need to think it is worth your effort, worth your energy to think this restriction is a violation of my freedom, or it doesn't make any sense to me, or I can't breathe within this restriction. I think when we stage rebellions just to be rebellious, we're noisemakers. We end up being noisemakers. And honestly, when I see how many people are rebel against convention, just to rebel against convention, without an agenda, without a way to say, I'm rebelling, but this is a better way. I'm rebelling, but this is the reason. The thing about the rebel is it's so powerful to decide to break out of a system, that to just be motivated by anger, to just be motivated by the desire to upset an apple cart is going to backfire. It will inevitably backfire, because there's no place for that rebellious energy to move in a productive way. And that's the thing about the choices we make, that makes time and reflection so valuable. I just could hit a pause button for a moment. And that, every archetype is just a neutral pattern. We bring the shadow and the light to an archetype. It has this wide range in which our psychic field operates. But it's up to us to utilize that in the personal choices that we make. So archetypes are totally impersonal and at the same time deeply intimate. They're intimate within our life. And when a feeling of rebellion arises, as it so often does in our lives, because that's in our nature. I don't know anybody who really loves to be told what to do. And at the same time, the paradox here is that so many people struggle with the fear of actually making choices. So while they don't want to be told what to do, they're not sure what to do, and they're afraid to make a choice because they know they'll be held accountable for that. So it can set up a kind of a combustion force in a person that can generate this rebellion that says, I don't know what I want, but I don't want this. And you just rebel. You just start causing chaos to cause chaos because you're not quite sure where to go. You know you don't want this, but you don't know what you want. And so what seems the natural move is to just disrupt where you are and to become a source of disruption, to rebel against that. One of the things that's true about rebels is that they don't make the best employees. Precisely because there is an instinct in someone who's really got the rebel archetype to rebel, that's it. This place is too restricting for me. What they require, they need me to be at work at 8:30, and I want to come at 9, and they need why do I need this, and It's this kind of thing. So by nature, they do well in either leadership positions or as entrepreneurs. On the other hand, that said, well, leadership. If you look at organizations where you have spokespeople that rise on behalf of unions like Amazon and Starbucks, and these people that rise up on behalf of the everyday worker to represent them and to start little rebellions within a system for union rights, for equal rights, this is the rebel in somebody. This is like the rebel advocate, but it starts a rebellion. And that's that kind of person, and it is an instinct. You can't repress that in somebody. If they sense, they are driven to liberate, to gain ground for themselves and others where there are restrictions. This to find a way. But what is a worthy rebellion? What is a worthy rebellion? I mean, obviously, you look back at something like the American Revolution and you think, well, now that was a worthy rebellion. Of course, we all know how it turned out. And we idolize the founding fathers, and but the January 6th uprising was a rebellion. And that was not a worthy rebellion. It was based on a lie. It was based on the frightening needs of a narcissistic lunatic. And it backfired. It backfired as it should. It was a dangerous uprising that was a threat to the very political standing and operations of the United States of America. There was nothing honorable in it. It was a deception from the get-go. And so it backfired. And many of the rebels are now in jail, as they should be. Too bad not for life. I would have put them in for life. But you can't stage what is an honorable rebellion. If you look at the rebellion for human rights, like Gandhi, like Nelson Mandela, the rebellion for union rights, equality, staging a rebellion for the rights of the environment, these types, or it's even in yourself, in your personal life, staging a rebellion because you realize that the situation you're living in is not one that really nurtures you, not one that can sustain you, not one that you feel allows for enough breathing space. People can stage rebellions, for example, against belief systems in them. How many, programs you see on Netflix that are about people, stories of people who have staged their own inner personal rebellions against the religious system they were brought up in. And they broke out of it, and they made their way in life to something where they had breathing space. But it took it was for them a genuine rebellion. They had to rebel against everything that they knew and create something that was brand new but more nurturing for them. So there are, I mean, what makes a rebellion worthy is that you are moving from a state of restriction to something more liberating, that in fact you need from within. To be rebellious just to cause chaos is never going to be satisfying. It's never going to work. It will inevitably in some way backfire because it's unproductive. The thing about the energy in the universe, if you observe with your inner eye, you'll see that all of nature is always productive. It's always moving something from one condition to a better condition, even if chaos is involved. Even if a fire is involved, fires are organically natural and good for forest. And then from that springs from the ashes and from this brand new growth. Just because something's chaotic doesn't make it a negative. Chaos is a natural force in the universe that, like the Kali principle, that is a part of the regeneration of life. So rebelliousness is part of what we need to keep life cycles going. We need to rebel against the old and allow for the new to come in. It doesn't always require rebellion, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. And when I look at all the people that fight for the rights of, the whales that get slaughtered, the animals that get slaughtered, the mindless killing of so many living creatures for trophies, these monsters that shoot animals for trophies and things like that. And they stage rebellions for the rights of creatures that cannot speak up for themselves. There is a direction where a rebellion on behalf of that which supports life, your inner life, your personal life, the greater life, is usually soul-directed, or shall I say, can often be soul-directed and is inspired. And those types of rebellions, God bless them, I hope they go on forever, because that is exactly what makes the rebel such a powerful, powerful archetypal force. But to be rebellious, just, and that rebellious stage during the teenage years, that is that stage where I think if a parent, it's coming, you know that they will fight you on this, that, you just got to know it's a given. It's a given that there's something in them. That mechanism is waking up. It is waking up. And I remember when the kids started to shave their hair, and then it had to be pink, and it had to be this, and it had to be that. And it was all part of rebelling against, I don't want to look like you. I don't want to work like you. I don't want my life to be like you, like this, like that. I have to discover the way I want my life to unfold. And that is just the rich journey of life. And eventually, when someone has the rebel spark as opposed to the rebel archetype, that rebel spark just remains a spark. And it activates at times when it's called for. But people who are rebels, and they have that in their energy field, in their psychic field, they are ones who will start, will keep progress moving in some way, shape, or form. They're the ones who want to be recognized as, I'm not like you. You know, there's when I see people driving these motorcycles, and they're loud and they're big and they've got music and all this other stuff. But what they're saying is, I'm a noisemaker, but I rebel against the restrictions that all of you put in, that you have to behave a certain way when you walk down the street. You have to keep quiet. You have to keep your sound quiet in the car. You have to be so mindful of the environment. Well, the hell with that. And blast off they go. And honestly, I see the rebel as they drive their motorcycles down the street, wanting to make all this noise just for a second. In the second they spark, they just have to be noticed that they are rebelling against conventional protocols that keep a social energy intact. And I think probably half of them go home, take off their leather gear and their nonsense, and go back to a conventional life during the week. But for the weekend, they need to stretch that rebel energy. I have to say that if you have the rebel, if you know inside that there's a part of you that's just given to rebellion, you just got to fight restriction, then indulge it, but make it worthwhile. Make it worthwhile. Don't watch that you don't rebel just to cause chaos for no reason, because that'll come back to haunt you. That'll come back to haunt you. If your kids are going through the rebellious stage, that's the rebellious stage. You can't stop it, but you know, do what you can to guide it. Do what you can to guide it. But this is in fact, show your kids movies like Rebel. They probably wouldn't watch that these days, but some of our greatest heroes are rebels. So I will end by saying this is a rebellious time. We are in a rebellious climate. We just had a rebellion, a mini rebellion staged in Ukraine, Russia. It didn't last long, that we can tell, but that was the beginning of a major rebellion. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but that was a rebellion. And who knows what the fallout psychically is from that. But the moment that everyone thought, oh my God, the Wagner group is rebelling against Putin, we knew that some possible change could happen in the war. And just because that rebellion has been quashed in front of our eyes doesn't mean it's not going on behind our eyes. Who knows? Who knows in this world? Who knows? But things are shaken, and once a rebellion starts, it's not often stopped just like that. Trust me. So who knows? Okay, everybody. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this.